Om. Namaskar. Welcome to the series of studies in the memories of Gurudev, our beloved Gurudev, Acharya Motilal Panditji, in a weekly study circle where we are witnessing the revelation of Gurudev of one of his greatest works, the Tantric and philosophical aspects of Kasmir ﷺ. We are in the very first chapter of this great book. Now we will go together and witness the revelation. Before entering into the real discourse, let's bow down in the lotus feet of our Guru Parampara through Guru Astuti, Guru Vandana taught by, invocation taught by Gurudev himself. Let's come. Om. अगाध संशयाम्बोधि समुतरन तारणिं वन्दे विचित्र अर्थपदां चित्रां तां गुरु भारतीम् सदा सदा अनुग्रह निग्रह गृहीत मुनि विग्रहो भगवान् सर्वासामुपनिषदां दुर्वासा जयति दैसिकः प्रथमः त्र्यंबका विहित संतति ताम्रपरणीर सन्माप्तिक प्रकर कांति विशेष भाजः पूर्व जयंती गुरुवो गुरु शास्त्र सिंधु कललोल केली कल नामल कर्णधारा जयति गुरुरेक एव श्री श्रीकंठो भुवि प्रतितः तदपरमूर्तिर् भगवान् महेश्वरो भूतिराजस्य श्री सोमानंद बोध श्रीमत उत्पल विनिहश्रिताः जयन्ति संविदा आमोद संदर्भा दिक्प्रसर्पिणः तद आस्वाद भरावेश ब्रह्महितां मति षट्पदीं गुरुर्लक्ष्मण गुप्तस्य नाद सम्मोहिनीं नुमः सदा अभिनव गुप्तं यत्पुराणं च प्रसीदमता हृदयं तत्परो उल्लासय स्वयं आस्फुरजे अनुत्तरम् अभिनवरूपा शक्तिः तद्गुप्तो यो महेश्वरो देवः तदुभययामलरूपम् अभिनवगुप्तं शिवं वन्दे यः पूर्णानन्दविश्रान्त सर्वशास्त्रार्थपारगः श्रीक्षेमराजः सो दृश्यादृष्टं मे गुरुरुतमः श्री वसुगुप्त महागुरु सोमानंद प्रभु उत्पल आचार्यन् अभिनवगुप्तं नाथं वन्दे श्रीक्षेमराजस्य नमो निखिल मालिन्य विलास फनपटियसे महामहेश्वराय श्रीरामाय गुरुरमूर्तये। जय गुरुदेव। Now bowing down in the lotus feet of Panchadevata. नमः कारुण्य देहाय वीराय शुभदंतिने भक्ति गम्याय भक्तानां दुःखहर्त्रे ते नमस्तुते यस्य उन्मेषनिमेषाभ्यां जगतः प्रलयोदयोः तं शक्तिचक्रविभं प्रभवं शङ्करमास्तुमः। नमः शिवाय सततं पञ्चकृत्य विधायिने चिदानन्दघं स्वात्म परमार्थ अवभासिना आस्यानं चित्रस्योघं साकारतमुपागतम् जगद्रूपतया वन्दे प्रत्यक्षं भैरवं वपुः। ॐ आनन्द सुन्दर पुरन्दर मुक्तमाल्यं मौलोहटेन निहितं महिषासुरस्य पादाम्बुजं भवतु मे विजयाय माचिरसिञ्चित् मनोहरम् अम्बिकाया सहशीर्षा पुरुषा पुनातु वः सहस्राक्षुर्भगवान् सहस्रपात गले अङ्गे घ्रीणमूले नयने च निश्चला त्रयो अपायामि यमपुरुष उपासते। ॐ सन्नो मित्रः सन्वरुणः सन्नो भवते हर्यमा सन्नो इन्द्रो बृहस्पतिः सन्नो विष्णुरुक्रमः। नमो ब्रह्मणे नमस्ते वायु त्वमेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्म असि त्वमेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्म वदिष्यामि ऋतं वदिष्यामि सत्यं वदिष्यामि तन्मा अवतु तत्त्वाकारम् अवतु अवतु माम् अवतु वक्तारम्। ॐ शांति शांति शांति। जय गुरुदेव। After invocation, now we are ready to enter into the real discourse. Can you enable me to share? Make me co-host or something. So the real discourse, the first chapter, very first chapter, today we are going to conclude the early sources of Shiva, the revelation about the Shivite sources, early sources, the very first chapter. So I'm going to present the final takeaways of this chapter today. And today we will conclude this one. So let's come down.
Are you able to share now?
Now it's okay. I'm now sharing. So slide is visible now. So that was a journey the first chapter, witnessing first chapter, the revelation, starting with the lecture overview, historical problems in the study. Then Gurudev indicated about the sources of the studies, talking about the bit background, prehistoric background. Then evidences are coming. So what are the nature of evidences? Then concept, the Shiva concept, which he discussed. And then going forward, Indus Valley civilization touch upon the Pasupati seal and what is the meaning of this male-female duality. The two opposite principles are conjoined here. Then the influences, Upanishadic influences, Sankhya influences, both influences he touched upon, and then discussing about the symbolism, the spiritual iconography. And then we are just witnessing those rituals versus symbolism and coming up to the cosmic creation. So in the last class, in the last lecture, we just concluded the cosmic creation, this slide. So now we are proceeding in the next discussion, philosophical evolution. So we explored the cosmic creation in the last lecture and saw how the universe is understood, the cosmogenesis we discussed just. So how universe is understood in Saiva philosophy, and it is understood as a dynamic interaction, the dynamic interaction between Shiva and Shakti. So the dynamic interaction between the consciousness and the divine energy. So the consciousness and divine energy, the energy and consciousness are interacting, and that interaction is in fact manifestation. That's why in Karika, beautiful verse is coming. Yasya unnamesa nimesa vyam. How this manifestation and contraction. So prasar and vistar, how it is cyclic process is happening within Shiva. So we learned that one. We learned that creation is not a one-time event, like Big Bang is happening one time. It's not like that. But it's an ongoing cosmic process. Here, Shaiva of Kasmir, our Guru Parampara, establishing it's a cyclic, it's an ongoing cosmic process. Now we arrive at one of the most important stages in the history of ShavismI with this slide, and that is the philosophical evolution. So we are going to examine today at this stage how Shaivism gradually evolved from primitive religious practices, ritual worship, mythological symbolism into a sophisticated philosophical system. And that system is capable of addressing fundamental questions. What are those fundamental questions? That question is ontological question, reality, about the reality, the study of consciousness, about the consciousness, about the moksha, liberation, and about the existence. So all the ontological question, the epistemological, the sociological aspects, this philosophy is capable to give answer. So this evolution transformed Shaivism from a religious tradition into one of the greatest philosophical systems of the world. Let's come together. So let's begin with a basic question. Let's ask a question today to yourself. Why do religions develop philosophies? Why philosophies in religion? धर्म में दर्शन का क्या काम? That is, we need to question this one. So initially religion focus on survival. You will survive. That is the first thing. Then the focus is on protection. So first survival. Once you survive, then protect yourself. Religion is teaching you. And then ritual is coming. Practice is coming. Worship is coming. But over the time, human beings begin asking deeper questions. Then deeper questions are coming. And what are those questions? Koham. That is the question. Who am I? Or why do I suffer? The questions came in the mind of little Buddha also. And what is the reality? What is the nature of reality? That question is also coming in the mind. What happened after death? Those are the questions. And what is the purpose of the existence? And these questions lead to philosophy. Without philosophy, we cannot answer these questions. Thus, philosophy emerges. Philosophy emerges when a religion being reflecting upon itself. So Shaivism undergoes exactly this process. That was the process. How philosophy is coming. So one by one, point wise, we are going to discuss here. The first point here on the slide, on the screen, from ritual to metaphysics. So in the earliest stages of religion, people focus primarily on sacrifices, on ceremonies, on sacred symbols and worship practices. The primary focus was on maintaining harmony with the divine power, harmony with the cosmos. That was the prime goal. That is the prime concern. So early Vedic religion, if we look back on the reflections revealed by Gurudev, so early Vedic religions focuses on like fire sacrifices, yajna. So yajna we are central, fire sacrifices we are central, and priest performs rituals, and the correct performance was considered important. Karma kanda, that is very important. And the emphasis was on the external. So these are all the external means basically. And the purpose was to maintain harmony with the cosmic powers. Rata. Now philosophical shift is happening. Gradually thinkers, philosophers, practitioners begin asking. The questions are coming. What is the meaning behind the ritual? Why we are doing this particular ritual? What really does the ritual symbolize? They're trying to understand the rituals. And this question transforms religion, and the focus shift from ritual performance to understand reality itself. And this is the beginning of metaphysics. Now metaphysics is coming into the religion. So what is metaphysics? And so many times I'm using this word also, as taught by Gurudev. Metaphysics. Metaphysics, that is the study of ultimate reality. Metaphysics is the study of being. Metaphysics is the study of consciousness. metaphysics is the study of existence. Instead of asking, how should we perform a ritual, yajna kaise kare, asking these questions, philosophers, the Saiva of Kasmir in particular, and the philosopher from the Indus, they ask question, what is the nature of reality? That ontological question is coming. So it has impact on Shaivism. And as a result, Shaivism becomes more, Shiva becomes more than a deity, more than a mythological figure. He becomes the ultimate reality himself, ultimate reality itself, Shiva. So understanding Shiva means understanding the consciousness, a study of the consciousness. That's the Jnana Marga. That is the Prativigya. So how from ritual to metaphysics this has happened? Now, second point, increasing abstraction. Increasing abstraction. As philosophy develops, religious ideas become increasingly abstract. And what does mean by abstraction? Basically, Gurudev is giving so, passionately inducing these ideas. So need to understand why exactly this abstraction. It means concrete, it means moving from concrete symbols towards the universal principles. So, for example, early worship may focus on, a sacred mountain or a stone linga or a divine image. Later, the philosophers ask, what do these symbols represent? And thus, the linga becomes not merely an object, but a symbol of infinite consciousness, but a symbol of cosmic creativity, but a symbol of ultimate reality. So how a spiritual iconography is coming, how philosophy is evolving within the Shaivism. Here we can have traces. And the evolution of Shiva itself. Originally, Shiva appears as a lord of animals, Pasupati, as a mountain deity, Kailaspati, as an esoteric yogi, Adi Yogi. Later, now Shiva is, gaining the philosophical flavor, and Shiva becomes consciousness itself. Shiva becomes supreme reality itself, and Shiva becomes cosmic principle itself. So this is abstraction. So this is abstraction. The symbol becomes philosophy. Symbol becomes philosophy. So how the increase in abstraction pushing Shaivism towards philosophy, and the philosophical evolution is happening within the Shaivism. Now come to the third point, systematic philosophy, and that's one of the most important stages in the Shaivism. Systematic philosophy, organized philosophy. As the idea becomes more complex, thinkers begin organizing them into coherent system, and Shaivism develops major philosophical schools. Major philosophical schools, as we go back, if we go back, how Gurudev discussed about the Shaiv Siddhanta and the Trick Shaivism, Lakules, Pasupat, Pasupats. Those are the schools of Shaivism. So these are basically the systematic study of Shaivism by organizing the thoughts, Shaivite thoughts, in a coherent manner. And each system address question such as ontological question, what is reality? Each system, any system, what is consciousness? What are the cause of bondage and how liberation achieved? Those are the basic questions. So each system is providing answers to these basic questions. So feature of systematic philosophy includes logical arguments, defined concepts, and the structured teachings, detailed metaphysical explanations. This marks a major intellectual development. Shaivism is no longer simply a devotional religion now. It becomes a sophisticated philosophical tradition. So, if I compare like an early religion, if you go to the early religion, the focus is on rituals, the focus is on worship. Now focus is shifting. The philosophical Shaivism, I'm talking today, philosophical Shaivism. So philosophical Shaivism focus is on consciousness, focus is on reality, focus is on liberation, and focus is on metaphysics. That is the philosophical Shaivism. It shows intellectual growth. So now come to the fourth point, the mature doctrines. So now it's a final stage of philosophical evolution when doctrines are mature. So over the century, the development of the Shaivism, the Swarup, the status of Shaivism today is not happened in a one night. Over the centuries, it took over the centuries. So over the centuries, Shaivism develops highly sophisticated doctrines. For example, like nature of consciousness, included nature of consciousness in Shaivism, and Shiva becomes pure consciousness. Nature of reality. Reality is understood as a manifestation of Shiva and Shakti, the divine play of the consciousness and the energy. Bondage, the human suffering, resulted from the ignorance here. And liberation is only achieved, when that ignorance is fade away through payas. So the ignorance, limitation, or the forgetfulness of the true nature. So liberation also occurs through the knowledge, jnana, through the recognition, prativigya, and through the spiritual realization, sakti path. So philosophical maturity at this stage, Shaivism can answer religious questions, any religious questions. Shaivism can answer psychological questions, monovaigyanic questions, and Shaivism can answer metaphysical questions. So this demonstrates philosophical maturity. One system can give you answer of religious questions, psychological questions, and metaphysical questions. So how mature this system is, how mature this doctrine is. So now how we can trace this long journey very quickly here. From the prehistoric stage, the nature worship is coming, the fertility symbols, ye linga and yoni I'm talking, and then Indus Valley civilization, the proto-Shiva is coming and indicating, giving reflections, although that's disputed whether it is really Shiva or not. It's a kind of other deity, but the reflection, but the indications are there. The yogic imaginary, the proto-Shiva, And then Vedic stage is coming when Rudra is being depicted there, and transformation happening. Rudra becomes Shiva, and then influences, conditioning is happening on Shiva, on Shaivism, the influence from the Upanishad, then from the Tantra philosophy, and this is the whole, this process. In this process, Shaivism developed as a systematic metaphysics, and this is the philosophical evolution of Shaivism. This is the philosophical evolution. So this point revealed by Gurudev matters a lot, because it is giving answers to many questions. So I'm concluding this slide with the final takeaway, this concept with the final takeaway, the philosophical evolution. Philosophical evolution transformed Shaivism from a collection of rituals and symbols into a profound system of metaphysics, consciousness, and revelation. So let's come. It's time to enter into the next stage. So having understood the philosophical evolution of Shaivism, now we move towards the final synthesis and examine how various cultures, religious systems, and philosophical traditions were integrated into a unified Shaivism worldwide. So let's come and let's examine together the cultural integration in Shaivism. So as we discuss the philosophical evolution of Shaivism, and we saw together how the tradition developed from the simple ritual practice into a sophisticated system of metaphysics, consciousness, and liberation. And now we arrive at one of the most important conclusions, and that is, in fact, it's a conclusion of the whole entire chapter, basically, the first chapter. So let's come and understand how Shaivism becomes a pan-India religious tradition by integrating diverse culture, ethnic, philosophical, and religious elements. In many ways, here Gurudev summarized the entire historical journey we have traced from prehistoric religion, Indus civilization, Vedic religion, Rudra worship, Tantra, philosophy, to the mature form of Shaivism, what we have today. So, before starting this discussion, let's ask a simple question, basic question. What is cultural integration? What exactly cultural integration means, for us? Let's reflect on this question for a second. Cultural integration refers to the process through which different traditions, beliefs, and communities gradually come together and form a larger unified systems. It does not mean one culture destroy another, like we have other religions in Abrahamic religions. It's not like here. It does not mean here one culture destroy another and then integration is happening. This is not integration in Shaivism, in Shaivite sense. One tradition completely replaces another. That is not happening here. Here, instead, it means mutual interaction, adaptation, and synthesis. And this process is one of the defining characteristics of the Indian civilization. That is the idea of India. That is the idea of real India. The integration. Integration is the idea where, it's a process. It's a process of interaction. It's a process of mutual interaction, mutual absorption, and the synthesis. So unlike many civilizations, that emphasized uniformity, Indian tradition often emphasized accommodation, assimilation, diversity within unity. And Shaivism becomes one of the best examples of this phenomenon. So Shaivism is a hardcore idea of India. Shaivism is a DNA of India. So let's start one by one, point by 4 points we have. How this integration is happening, this interaction is happening, this assimilation is happening, this absorption is happening. The first one is Aryan and non-Aryan fusion. We'll talk about that fusion. So this is perhaps the most important factor in the development of Shaivism, because understanding the two systems is important here. Then only we can understand the fusion, how these two systems, without destroying each other, they got a fusion, they got an evolution. So Aryan tradition, that brought Vedic hymns, that brought sacrificial rituals, the yajnas, and the fire worship. That's a ritual, havan, yajna, and the priestly tradition. Gods such as Indra, Agni, Varuna, Som, those gods, and their religion emphasized on the cosmic order, Rata, the cosmic order, ritual precision, and the social hierarchy. That's the Aryan tradition. Now let's come to the non-Aryan tradition. The indigenous population contributed nature worship. They are into the fertility cult. They are into the mother goddess traditions, animal symbolism, and the proto-yogic practices. Their spirituality was often nature-centered, experiential, and symbolic. So these two traditions. Now fusion is happening. So instead of remaining separate, these traditions gradually merged. For example, like Rudra. Rudra absorbs indigenous characteristics and becomes Shiva. Fertility symbols becomes integrated into the Shiva Shakti symbolism. And the yogic tradition emerged with the philosophical thought. And the tribal deities becomes identified with the major Hindu gods. The polygod system is coming in. So this process creates a new religious synthesis. That is the integration. That is the integration. If we reflect more upon here, then it's time to think of what would happen. What would happen if Aryans had completely rejected local traditions? Let's think. you know, most likely social conflict would increase if this, you know, integration not happen, and the religious integration would become difficult then. Thus, the cultural fusion becomes essential for civilizational unity, and Shaivism is one of the greatest examples of this fusion. Now, second point, broad acceptance. Broad acceptance. One reason Shaivism becomes successful was its extraordinary inclusiveness. It's not merely inclusiveness. Shaivism got a characteristics, and that characteristic is extraordinary inclusiveness. Shiva appeals to many different groups. Shiva is a god of everyone. He is not a god of a small elite sections. He is a god of esoterics because he is the supreme yogi, Adi yogi. He is a god of villagers. He is a local god because he was close to the nature and the folk traditions. He is the god of philosophers, Gyanis, because he become identified with the ultimate reality. He is the source of knowledge, and he is the only source of knowledge that is being established. He is a god of kings because he symbolizes the cosmic supremacy, cosmic authority. That was, he is the god of kings, and he is the god of tribal communities because he retains connection with the indigenous traditions. So universal appeal is coming. The broader acceptance is happening here due to universal appeal. Very few deities, very few deities got such wide appeal. It's, if you think like, why it happened, like why some religious figures become universal and while other remains local. So it might be due to flexibility, it might be due to adaptability, it might be due to symbolic richness, and Shiva possesses all these qualities. So this explains his spread acceptance across India. His fan following is highest fan following you can think of on this line, due to his characteristics, due to his appeal to everyone. He's appealing to everyone. He's attracting everyone. Now, the third point is the diverse practices. So, one of the remarkable features of Shaivism is its diversity. You can worship Shiva by any ways. There's so many ways. So there are diverse practices. The diversity in the Shaivism, that is also one of the remarkable features for this culture integration that qualifies Shiva for the culture integration. For example, temple worship. You go to the temple and ritual offerings, daily worship, festivals, and that is the practices for a Saivite. If you are not doing this temple worship, you are doing only yoga, the meditation, the breath control, pranayam, or the esoteric practices given by your guru. That is also Shiva sadhana. This practice is also Shiva sadhana. Shiva is happy. If you are not doing this, If you are only into the Tantra, and practicing the mantras, the yantras, the energy practices given by Gurudev, the mystical practices, then that is also Shaivism, Shaivite practices. So how diverse these practices? If you are doing nothing, not all these, no Tantra, no temple worship, no yoga, Shiv yoga, only bhakti, the personal devotion, the singing rhymes, the emotional worship, that is also Shiva is happy in this case. So diverse practices, diverse practices qualifies him for broader appeal. The regional diversity also I want to highlight here. The different regions developed distinct forms of Shiva from the remote south to remote northeast on Indian subcontinent. They developed different distinct Shaivite forms. South India, then Nataraja is very popular there in South. And Kasmir you are coming. In Kasmir you are coming, you get nothing. You get only the philosophical Shiva, the philosophical Shaivism. In the Shaiva of Kashmir, that talk about only philosophical Shaivism. Go to Nepal. Nepal, that is the Pasupatinath, the distinct form of Shiva. When location is changing. Tamil, come to Tamil Nadu, the Tamil Desh, the Bhakti saints, nine Maras, a lot of stories, Bhakti stories, we all aware. So, despite differences, all recognize Shiva as central. And this demonstrates unity without uniformity. And that is the basic idea of India, because the other religions, they are thinking like for unity, they require uniformity. But here, unity without uniformity, unity in diversity here. So let's talk unity in diversity. This idea is extremely important. If I ask how can a tradition remain unified while allowing diversity? It's a very mind-boggling, because it's happening every day around us. So we are very used to it. But if you think very honestly, then how a tradition remain intact if that tradition is allowing diversity? It might be a risk. But Shaivism provide a possible answer. Different practices can coexist if they share common symbols, if they share common values, if they share common spiritual goals. This flexibility helps explain the longevity of the Shaivism. So wherever you go, the Tamil Desh or the Nepal Pasupatas or the Kashmir, the philosophical Shaivism, wherever you go, but you will get the common values, common soterical goals, and the common ontological answers. So this common symbolism is enhancing the longevity of the Shaivism. Now come to the final point, the fourth one, the unified tradition. So despite immense diversity, Shaivism eventually develops a coherent identity. Common themes, common themes includes Shiva as a supreme reality. Whether devotional, philosophical, tantric, Shiva remains central. That is for sure. Shiva remains central whether you are going through the Tantra or through the philosophy or through the devotion. It doesn't matter. Shiva is central. And talk about liberation. So all Shiva tradition seeks freedom from the ignorance. That is the common freedom from the ignorance. And a spiritual realization, the Shiva, Samuchya. All Saivite schools, these are the common. And the study of the consciousness, Shiva, Shaivism is the path. Shaivism is a study of the consciousness. So consciousness becomes the central concept. In any school of Shaivism, consciousness is the central because Shiva is the central and Shiva is the consciousness. So Shiva is increasingly understood as a pure consciousness, abstract consciousness. That is the Shaivism. And in any school of Shaivism, Shiva Shakti unity. So different schools interpret it differently, but central is there, Shiva Shakti unity. The relationship between the cosmic, the relationship between the abstract consciousness and the energy remain fundamental in any school of Shaivism. So civilization's significance is this unity creates one of the most enduring religious traditions in the world history. Savagisms become local and universal at the same time. Popular and philosophical at the same time, ancient and evolving at the same time. That is the beauty. That is the beauty of Savagism. That is the beauty of Savagism. So let's conclude this cultural integration through this final takeaway. Cultural integration is the process through which Savagism transforms from the multiple local tradition into a broad, inclusive, and unified religious systems that continues to influence Indian civilization even today. So let's come in the next slide. Next revelation by beloved Gurudev, Savagism formation. So having understood one of the most important concepts, the cultural integration, we are now ready. We are now ready to conclude the chapter, the first chapter, basically. How the early sources of Savagism evolved into one of the most influential spiritual tradition in the history of India. And as we discussed the culture integration, and we saw how various tradition, Aryans, non-Aryans, indigenous, tribals, yogic, tantric, and philosophicals gradually emerged into a broader religious framework. And now we arrived at the culmination. We arrived at the culmination of the entire chapter, basically. And that one is a Shaivism formation. So let's discuss this extremely important revelation by Gurudev, that is the central, of the central questions of the first chapter is being answered here. Like how did Shaivism emerge as a distinct religious tradition? Basically, in the first chapter, Gurudev revealed that one. So everything we have studied so far, starting from the proto Shiva to Rudra to tribal influences, Upanishadic philosophy, yoga and tantra, Shiv Shakti doctrine, all come together here. So this is here we this point, this slide represents the final synthesis of the early source of Shaivism. So let's ask a simple question. What does it mean for a religious tradition to be formed? A religious tradition to be formed. So a religion is not fully formed merely because people worship a deity. You imaginarily build a deity and start worshipping. Religion is not going to be formed. Religion is not going to be formed only on the basis of the rituals. A ritual exists. Sacred symbols presents. A religious tradition becomes established when it develops a distinct identity, when it develops organized worship, when it develops philosophical foundation, religious communities, sacred literatures, and institutional structures. These are the prerequisites of formation of a religion. And Shaivism gradually acquires all these characteristics. So let's start with the first discussion. Start with the first point: emerges as distinct path. Shaivism emerges as a distinct path. In the earliest periods, Shiva-related elements exist separately. Proto Shiva imaginary, Rudra worship somewhere, and tribal practices somewhere. Esoteric traditions was there. So these were not yet part of the unified religion. They are staggered here and there. You know, Now the consolidation is happening. The gradual consolidation is happening over time, and various streams becomes converging. Indigenous tradition, the nature worship, and the fertility symbolism, animal cults, those are coming. From the Vedic tradition, Rudra and the sacrificial religion, that characteristics is coming in. From the philosophical tradition, the Upanishadic thought, the Brahman concepts, and from the yoga tradition, the meditation and asceticism is coming. From Tantra tradition, Sakti, mantra, and energy practices are coming. And these elements gradually formed a coherent system, a coherent system. And eventually people begin, people begin identifying themselves, especially as Shaivas. So those people in the society, those people are being identified now as a Saiva, as a Saivites, Saiv, Upasak of Shiva. So Saiva means the follower of Shiva. Saiva means devotees of Shiva. Saiva means practitioner of Shaiva philosophy. So that's the Saiva. That's a Sai. So this marks the emergence of the Saivism as a distinct religious path. So, if a question arises, what point does a collection of practices become a religion? A particular set of practices, if that is going on, and when that will be identified as a religion, you know. So this in you know that's very important to think of, because people start practicing the Saiva philosophy and following Shiva, and then at one point of time in the society recognized them as Saiva, as a Saiv, and then this religion, this formation of Saivism happened. So it's a very tactical and thought-provoking question need to be reflect upon. Now let us move the second point: organized worship. So as Saivism develops, worship becomes increasingly organized. Earlier practices often local, tribal, informal. Now we begin to see temples. The temple culture is coming in. Ritual manuals and the priestly traditions, festivals, pilgrimage centers. So a temple becomes central institutions. For example, we got a 12 Jyotirlingas and other important energy centers, temple worship. And then Shiva worship develops a specific practice like Abhishek, Rudra Abhishek, or the Linga worship, or the mantra recitation, or offering to the Shiva. Festivals such as Mahasivratri. So thus worship becomes systematic and organized. And this organized worship helps preserve traditions. If you organize the practices, then that will preserve. And that is also help to create communities. Everybody is coming to celebrate Shivratri. Everyone is coming to the temple. So creating a communities and transmit teachings across generations. The Guru Sisya Parampara. So this contributes greatly to the survival of Shaivism. Third point, the philosophical system. Philosophical system, one of the region Shaivism becomes influential is that it develops sophisticated philosophy. Earlier religion focused mainly on rituals and mythology. You got a lot of mythologies for every devata, for every deity. You got a story and the sacred symbols and the rituals. But mature Shaivism asks, what is reality? Giving answer to this question. What is consciousness? And why human suffers? And how can liberation be achieved? Those are the fundamental questions. Shaivism is giving answers. The mature Shaivism is giving answers. So the development of schools, the Shaivite schools, various schools, where several philosophical, systems emerges like a Shaiv Siddhanta focus on devotion, rituals, theology. Kasmir Shaivism, Kasmir Shaivism focus on consciousness and non-dualism. Isvara Advaitavad and the recognition of self as a Shiva, the Prativigya, and the different schools like the Pasupatas, Lakulesas, and a lot many more schools. So these systems transform Shaivism into a complete intellectual tradition. So Shaivism is a complete intellectual tradition now, not merely a religion, but also philosophy. It's a more philosophy if I look at Shaivism through the lens of Kashmir Shaivism. Now the fourth point, sectarian development. So as Shaivism expands, different groups develop different interpretations. That is very natural. And it is natural in a large tradition. So like I'm giving you example, Pasupatas. Pasupatas, one of the earliest Saiva sects. So within the Shaivism, these sects are being developed. Kapalis, Kapalikas, associated with the esoteric and the Tantric practices, and Nath tradition that focus on yoga with a spiritual discipline, and Kashmir Shaivism, what we are in. the developed, sophisticated, non-dual philosophy. So for Kasmir Savagism, for Tantric Savagism, it's a study of consciousness. It's a study of metaphysics, the philosophical system, looking at Savagism, looking at Shiva as the absolute consciousness, and studying the consciousness. That is all about in a trick. So we are seeing here diversity within unity. So this system, these sects, they differs, but they share Shiva at the center and same liberation goal and a spiritual discipline. So diversity exists within a common framework. So, historical importance, sectarian developments indicates maturity. Tradition becomes influential when multiple interpretation emerges. Debates occurs, philosophical school develops, and it happens in Shaivism. That's why Shaivism is profound. That's why Shaivism is valid. That's why Shaivism is solid. Shaivism encourages debate. It encourages Shastra. It encourages multiple interpretation. So that is the characteristics of a mature system. If a system is insecure, immature, then always stop debate. But this is not the case of Shaivism. So let's come in the final conclusion, the final takeaway of this slide. Shaivism formation. Shaivism formation represents the culmination of centuries of religious, cultural, philosophical, and spiritual development, transforming diverse tradition into one of the most influential paths in Indian civilization. So let's conclude this chapter today together. The very first chapter by GuruDev, the early source of Shaivism. So, having understood the formation of Shaivism in the previous slide, we now prepare to conclude. We now prepare to conclude the chapter and reflect on the major themes that shaped the early sources and development of the Saiva tradition. So let us come together. Let us come together, and it's a milestone. Today we are completing the first chapter, the early source of Shaivism. This chapter, has taken us on a long historical, cultural, and philosophical journey. We began with the question how this chapter started. Why did Shaivism come from? Where did Shaivism come from? The early source. Where did Shaivism come from? And throughout the chapter, we discovered the answer is neither simple nor linear. It's a very complex. Shaivism did not emerge suddenly. It evolved gradually. It evolved gradually through the centuries of cultural interaction, religious transformation, philosophical reflection, spiritual experimentation. This concluding, this is summarizing everything we have studied. Everything we have studied yet. Just I'm going to reflect upon point wise. The very first point I picked up, that one, the deep prehistoric roots. So Shaivism has deep prehistoric roots. One of the most one of the most discoveries, one of the most important discoveries of our study is the origin of Shaivism extend far beyond recorded history. Before Vedic religion, before organized temples, before philosophy, before philosophical schools, there already exists nature worship, fertility cults, animal symbolism, animal ani- animal symbolism, and tribal spirituality. So and the, Proto Shiva and Indus Valley civilization. Now Gurudev took us to witness the examine the Indus Valley civilization and the famous Pasupati seal, which depicts a seated yogi figure surrounded by animals. Many scholars interpret figure as Proto Shiva. Although I remind here, although the evidence remains debated, and it is because we are not able to fully understand the Indus Valley scripts. So the significance is not whether the seal definitely represents Shiva. The significance is that many elements later associated with Shiva already existed. Whether it is yoga or whether it is a nature symbolism, the animal associations, and spiritual disciplines. The Shaivism poses deep prehistoric foundations. So early source of Shaivism, it's very hard to understand because roots are somewhere prehistoric. That is the indication, and that indication is coming from the evidence. Sir John Marshall did a lot of research there. Gurudev has, indicated in this very first chapter. The second point is complex evolution. Complex evolution, Shaivism evolves through a complex historical process. Throughout this chapter, we repeatedly observed Shaivism is not a product of a single source. There is no single source. Instead, it developed through multiple stages. If I count in stages, like first stage, prehistoric religion. So the nature worship, fertility symbolism, tribal practices. Second stage, Indus civilization. So the proto-Shiva imaginary or the yogic symbolism. The third stage is the Vedic religion. So Rudra emerges, fires, storm deity, and associated with the destruction and healing. And the fourth stage is the transformation. Now transformation is happening. Rudra gradually evolves into Shiva. He gains positive attributes, philosophical significance, and the universal appeal. And the fifth stage is the philosophical development. So Shiva becomes associated with the Brahma, consciousness, liberation, mystical realization, and then stage 6 is coming. Stage 6 is Tantra. So Shakti emerges. Shakti emerges a divine energy, the creative force, and the dynamic principle. And thus Shaivism evolves through continuous transformation. And that continuous transformation is being, beautifully revealed by Gurudev in this chapter. And the third point is like a blend of cultures. So Shaivism represents a blend of cultures. Perhaps the most important theme of this chapter is cultural integration. We repeatedly observed the interaction between Aryan tradition, from Aryan tradition, the Vedic rituals, the sacrificial religion, and the priestly tradition is coming. And non-Aryan tradition, the indigenous tradition, tribal spirituality is coming from there. The nature worship is coming from there, and the fertility, cult, and folk traditions are coming out from the non-Aryan traditions. And then syncretism is happening. The fusion is happening. The process through which this tradition emerges is called syncretism. Gurudev always, pronouncing this one, syncretism. So this process allows Shaivism to absorb local gods, to absorb indigenous symbols, to absorb yogic traditions and philosophical ideas without losing coherence. So without losing coherence, that happened through the process of syncretism. So why it now Shiva as a symbol of synthesis. So Shiva himself symbolizes this blending. He is simultaneously a tribal god, a Vedic deity, supreme yogi, cosmic dancer, Nataraj, and philosopher's absolute. If you are a philosopher, Gyan Margi, then Shiva is absolute consciousness for you, nothing else. Contemplate on that, study. And a devotional deity for a bhakta. For a bhakta, he is a devotional deity. For a Vedic Brahman, he is a Vedic deity. For a yogic practitioner, esoteric, he is a supreme yogi, Adi yogi. So he is everything. He got a universal appeal. So it's a very few religious figures embody such diversity. The amount of diversity in Shiva, in Shaivism, you cannot find anywhere. So this explains why Shiva appeals to esoterics, to villagers, to kings, to philosophers, to mystics. At the same time, Shiva is appealing everyone. That's why he's a god of the gods. He's a Mahadev. Now come to the fourth point, the foundation for latter Shaiva philosophy. So now we arrive at the final and the most important conclusion. The early sources of Shaivism becomes the foundation for the latter Shaiva philosophy. Everything we studied eventually contributed to the development of the major philosophical systems. And that is being influenced by Upanishads. Because Upanishad is coming and influencing with the concept of the Brahman, concept of the consciousness is also coming there, and the self-realization. A lot of influences from the Sankhya. That is the Upanishadic influences only. And the yoga, that influenced Shaivism, like introducing meditation, asceticism, and inner discipline. Tantra is coming to influence. So introduce Shakti, energy, and the mystical transformation. And then later philosophical schools are being developed. That is, Shiva Siddhanta, or Pasupatas, Veer Saiva, or Kasmir Saiva, so many, all built upon this earlier development. So earlier development, that was the foundation for the development of these schools. So, major philosophical questions, these schools attempt to answer. Those questions are ontological questions. What is reality? What is consciousness? And what is the cause of bondage? How liberation achieves? So all the ontological, epistemological, and sociological questions, these schools are attempting to give answer and qualified to give answer, and they gave answers also. So The early Saivism becomes the foundation for one of the most sophisticated philosophical traditions in India. So, today is a last lecture for this first chapter. So, I'm briefly summarizing the entire chapter in the end, how we begin, how Gurudev started teaching this chapter to us. We begin with historical uncertainty, the sources of study, and the prehistoric background. Then we examine together the Proto-Siva, the Indus civilization, and the yogic symbolism. Then touch upon the Rudra, the tribal influences, and then transformation of Rudra into Siva. Then followed by Upanishadic philosophical influences of the Brahman, the yoga, and the mystical experiences, from Tantra and Shakti. And finally, the cultural integration happened, the formation of Shaivism, now the first Shaivism formed. So everything fits together into one historical narrative. One historical narrative. So, on conclusion of this chapter, we should always remember Shaivism is not the product of single moment, text, or founder. No founder in Shaivism. No one text in Shaivism. And no one single moment it happens, this ghatana, this event is happening, and now Shaivism is started. No, nothing like that. It is a result of long historical processes involving prehistoric symbolism, involving Vedic religion, involving tribal traditions, involving yogic practices, involving Upanishadic philosophy and Tantric spirituality. Though, through centuries of cultural and philosophical evolution, these elements came together to form one of the most influential religious and philosophical tradition in Indian subcontinent, in Indian civilization, and that is Shaivism. I am concluding with this chapter with this thought: the early source of Shaivism reveal not only the history of a religious tradition, but also a history of India's ability to integrate diversity into unity, ritual into philosophy, and mythology into profound spiritual insights. So I'm concluding this chapter with this thought. And I'm praying, I'm bowing down in the lotus feet of Gurudev. If I did anything good in this chapter, that is his blessings only. And any error is happening, that is only on me. That is my responsibility. Jai Gurudev. In the end, I'm concluding this class with Abhinav Gupta Pad Bhairavastava. Bhairav is a Gurudev is always, almost in every third class, second class, is giving definition. Bharanam, Ravanam, Vamanam. That is the Bhairav, that is the consciousness. So let's emerge into the Bhairav consciousness by the hands revealed by Mahamaheshwar Acharya Abhinav Guptapad, our Guru from our Guru Parampara. Atha Bhairavastavaha व्याप्त चराचर भाव विशेषम चिन्मयमेकमनन्तमनादिं भैरवनाथमनाथ शरण्यं तन्मयचित्ततया हृदय वन्दे तन्मयमेतदशेषमिदानीं भाति मम तमनुग्रहसाध्या त्वं च महेश सदैव ममात्मा स्वात्मयं मम तेन समस्तम् स्वात्मनि विश्वगते त्वयि नाथे तेन न संसृतिभीतिकथास्ति सतस्वपि दुर्धर दुःख विमोह त्रास विद्यायसु कर्म गणेषु अन्तकमां प्रतिमादृशमेनां क्रोधकरालतमाविनिधिः शङ्करसेवनचिन्तन धीरो भीषण भैरव शक्तिमयोऽस्मि इतस्मुपोधव भवमय संविदितारित भूरित मिश्रा मृत्युयमान्तक कर्म पिशाचर नाथ नमस्तु न चातु बिभेमि प्रोश्चित सत्य विबोध मरीचि प्रोश्चित प्रोदित सत्य विबोध मरीचि प्रोश्चित विश्व पदार्थ सतत्व भाव परामृत निर्भर पूर्णेर तो ये हम आत्मनि निर्मिति मेमि मानस गोचर में दैव क्लेश दशा तनुताप विधात्री नाथ तदैव मम त्वयि भेद श्रोत्र परामृत वृष्टि रुदेति शंकर सत्यमिदं व्रत दान स्नान तपो भव ताप विदारी तापक शास्त्र परामृत चिंता यस्यन्ति चेसी निर्मिति धारा नृत्यति गायति हृष्यति गाढं संविधियं मम भैरवनाथ त्वां प्रियमाप्य सुदर्शनमेकं दुर्लभमन्यजनैः समज्ञं वसुर्पश्ये कृष्णदशाम्याम् अभिनवगुप्तः स्तवं मिं करोत् येन विबुधभवमरुसन्तापं शमयति झटयति जनस्य दयालुः इति भैरवस्तवः। जय गुरुदेव, जय गुरुदेव, जय गुरुदेव। हर हर महादेव, हर हर महादेव। So thank you very much for joining in today. I'm closing this meeting now. Thank you.